Hello guys and welcome back to the sim here in Brunei. Taking a step away from the dual controls at the moment. That's because I finally finished printing the prototype parts for the 757 and the 767 throttle quadrant. This should be a fun build. It's like a giant Airfix model kit in front of me here. All I've got to do is wire it up and assemble it. Let's crack on. First up are the throttle handles, and this being the prototype, I've had to super glue the micro switch into position. So first up is the throttle levers, and the very first modification I need to make straight away. I've had to super glue the micro switch into position, and that's because I forgot to put the screw holes in for the 2mm screws to hold it in position. That works fine for the time being. Now we need to insert our 10K pot for the thrust reverser, and that should hopefully just slide in like so, and we attach the nut on the opposite side. Next up is our push button for the autopilot disengage. Hopefully that will screw into position. Now I think that's all the electrical components needed in the throttle handles. Let me do some wiring and I'll get back to you. One of the things I learned in one of the last videos on the 737 throttles was I didn't show the routing of the wiring. So this time I'll give you a closer look. First of all, I'm just going to wire all the grounds up together, so I only need one wire going through the unit. That's the wiring complete, and hopefully now you can see that it comes through the far side, into this side, and then back through the far side, and this will go into the base of the throttle unit here. So we've got the 3D printed trigger, and hopefully that will fit in to position, and we're just going to screw it down. It's an M4 screw. Doesn't want to be too tight so it interferes with the switch, and that's how we want it. So next up is our throttle knob. All we've got to do is align the holes. And now we can put the outer cover on. Next up is our thrust reverser arm and knob. They just simply screw together. And then we're going to make sure that our pot is in the central position, and we're going to fit our arm in the central position. Now for the difficult part, and that's to get these wires to stay in the channel while I put the inner cover on. And the last part for this throttle lever is to insert the aluminium bar into the unit. And there we have our two throttle levers for the 757, 767 throttle assembly. And here we have the throttle base brackets, labelled number 1 and number 2. We're going to do number 2 first, and these are going to have an uncanny resemblance to the 737 throttle assembly, and that's because honestly they work so well. And I really like the fact that with the glue brakes you can set the friction of the levers. Got the throttle stem. Now this has to go on a certain way. It's got the cutout that will go over the nut of the potentiometer. Perfect. And then of course we actually need the screw that will tighten onto the brake to create the friction required. Quickly do that up. Perfect. That's already quite tight. All I need to do now is put some wires onto the potentiometer. So before we move on and put these bracket assemblies into the main body, I'm going to talk to you about the potentiometers. I'm using 10K high quality pots, and they're numbered 3, 2, 1. So the two outside pins here and here, they can be 5 volts or ground either way. By changing them around, it doesn't matter which way they go, as long as the two outside pins 1 and 3 are either ground or 5 volts, it just reverses the potentiometer, not accelerometer. That's work, that's not this job. The center pin is always the analog pin, and that always goes to the Arduino analog in, or Arduino Micro Pro, Leonardo, or other interface card we're going to use. So for me, for this example, I've actually reversed this pot because it's the opposite direction to the other side. So for me, number 3 now is the ground, which is black. The right hand pin number 1 is positive on this side, and that's red. And the middle pin, which is the analog, is the brown, and that's how I've color coded my wires this time round. And here we have this beautiful center main body produced by the Ender 3 Pro. This is the Pro version, and it's come out absolutely beautiful. And we'll put the bracket in, and hopefully it's just going to slide into position, and then we need some M3 screws. I'm using countersunk screws because they're going to look the best. Going to take our throttle lever, and hopefully this time I can demonstrate clearly how the wires are routed, so you guys don't have to be going and drilling some extra holes that aren't needed. So I've created this slightly rounder hole at the end, and that's to make these cables go in nice and easy. And hopefully they feed through the throttle stem. In fact, this is already going quite well, and they go through the wiring hole in the bracket. You can see them coming out. I'm going to give them a little tug. A little bit more. Find the one that's better. And our throttle lever, hopefully now, will slide into the stem, like so. And you can see how the wires are routed. That feels great already. Haven't set the tension, but that feels great. Loving it. And of course, all I've got to do now is find the number 2 base bracket, put it on, and do up the screws. And there we have the number 2 throttle assembly all wired up, ready to go. Now to repeat the process with the number 1. And there we have our throttle levers and the center body assembly all done. That didn't take long, and it's starting to look the business. I think next we'll do is the fuel cutoff switches. So with these new toggle switches, hopefully they're just going to push into the unit. So before we go any further, I want to fit the decal. And once again, I've raised the text so that you can just highlight it with a paint pen. It makes it exceptionally easy. Here's our decal, and that should, if I've got the CAD right, it's just a bit tight. Should screw into position. Now for our throttle switch caps. They're made from 3 different parts, so you're going to need 3 different colours of PLA. You're going to need silver for the base, black PLA for the cap, which has some little holes in, and then we've got some translucent red, which makes the LED cap. The LED cap just fits into the black housing. It was a nice fit, snug actually. And then we've got our silver base. Okay, so that's a little bit loose. Bit of super glue. And I'm just going to put it on the edges. And then hopefully push the cap on. And these caps just push over the toggle switches all the way. Got my little LED tester, and we're going to plug the 2 wires in, and we'll give it a quick test. And you can see that they work really well, and I'm quite pleased with them. So next up we have the enunciator boxes. I'm just going to push these orange clear LEDs in. Make sure the legs are the same way round. And then I'm going to bend one set of legs to the other. And that's our enunciator bases all created, all with the LEDs in. All we need now is the caps, and these are printed in translucent red, spray black, and now we need to take the top surface off to allow the light to come through. I'm going to wrap some masking tape around the end of my file. Put the caption onto the file and then gently sand the top surface away. And if we put the caption onto the enunciator base and push the LED tester, you can see that it lights up. And for 3D printed parts, these enunciators I think will do. So we've got our enunciator boxes all done. We've got our captions done. And all I've got to do is super glue the captions onto the enunciator boxes. And now we get to insert our enunciators into the unit. And the last part for this section is the decal, and that will just simply screw onto the body. And there we have the center body of the 757-767 throttle quadrant, all complete. Obviously less wiring. Next up we're going to do the left hand body assembly, which is the speed brake lever and trim assembly. It's a very similar design to the throttles. We've got our bottom bracket, got our high quality pot. Hopefully I'm just going to insert that through the hole. I've got my speed brake stem. Just going to push that onto the pot. Going to put our speed brake in, which again is just hot glue. That's hopefully going to slide in there. With our speed brake bracket complete, all I'm going to do is put the cover on and attach it with some screws. This time I've got a bit of brass bar, and I just put a slight kink in it at the required dimensions. They'll be on the net on the website. Just bent it in a vise. I've countersunk 2 holes for the handle. The brass bar will just slide into the handle assembly and we can screw it on. And this should then slot into the speed brake stem, like so. That feels quite good. That's the decal on. Next is going to be the 2 trim switches. Now for the trim switches, you need 3 position on, off, on momentary switches. These are not them. I don't have any. I can't get hold of any. There's no mail here in Brunei at the moment, so I'm going to have to make do. And these will do just for demo purposes. We'll just push into the unit and we put the nut on top and just simply tighten it up. With our trim switches installed, we need our trim decal. This one's guarded on the 757 and we're just going to screw that into place. We've got our trim knobs. Now these just push on quite firmly onto the switches. I'm not going to glue them. If you need to, perhaps a bit of hot glue in there as well, but these are a tight fit, so you shouldn't need glue anyway. Hopefully now you can see the operation. They'll go forward, and if they were momentary, you'd be able to go trim forward, trim up, trim down. And obviously the center position would be off. Don't have that, don't copy this way. Use the correct switches. So now we have the stab trim cutout switches that go at the lower part here, and they are just simple on-off switches, and I've got them. They're wired up, and hopefully what they're going to do is they're going to just slide in from the bottom. Make sure I orientate the switch the right way round. Switch guard on, apply the nut, the last part for the left hand body assembly is the lower decal. And there is our left hand body assembly, all complete. Operational speed brake, semi-operational trim switches, stab trim out switches also work. Now we just need the flap section, which is busy printing behind me. So while we're waiting for the flaps detent to print, let's talk about the flaps lever assembly. We can actually build that now, and I've tried to make this a little bit simpler in the support, how it's made. A lot of you guys said that you were struggling to get the support structure out of the center. So what I've done on this version is create a plate at the bottom, so you can basically push the support structure out from the unit and grab it at both ends. The plate then goes over the top to secure everything, and it's a done deal. I really hope that's going to make it simpler for you guys. Time will tell. I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments. We're going to build our flaps lever, and to start with we've got our spring. The correct one will be in the build guide, and I'm just going to loop a bit of lacing cord string around the bottom of the spring so we can pull it tight when we need to. Hopefully we're going to insert that into the upper arm assembly. With our spring in, going to insert a countersunk screw to hold it in position. And you can see now that with the string we can pull the spring into location. It's going to insert the lacing cord through the unit, and there is a hole at the bottom to take the lacing cord all the way through and pull it out the bottom, and that way we can insert the upper flaps lever into the lower flaps lever and tension the spring. So hopefully you can see I've pulled the spring down to the hole location. I've got my screw, and hopefully going to insert that through the spring. So there we have our completed flaps lever. It's got a good firm feel to it. Just need to tighten up the spring plate through to the side, like so. And I'm hoping that's going to make it a lot easier to build. Got our lacing cord sticking out the bottom, and I should just be able to pull that out now, and it's done. If the hole is too big for your potentiometer, you can then insert a 3mm screw into the hole where the lacing cord came out, and you can tighten that onto the shaft of the potentiometer. And here we have the flaps lever body. It's the right hand side. The detent is still printing on the printer behind me, but let's see how far we can get building it. Until that we need that part. We've got our high quality pot, it's wired up. Just need to insert it into the horseshoe hole. Stick the nut on. Next up we've got the decal. I'm just going to screw that into place, and that's as far as we can go with this side, because all we've got to fit is the flaps lever. I think what we'll do now is we'll build the whole assembly while we wait for that flaps detent, because that can still be fitted on the end piece here. So while we're here, let's just screw on the switch guards. So when I created this unit, the idea was to have the interface card sat in this part here. Because I want to put it together, all I'm going to do is I'm going to put the wires outside and I'll fit the interface card in this prototype on the outside for the time being. Because in the next video, I want to show you how I wire up to the new interface cards that I've got, and they are the Micro and the Leonardo. I learned from the 7371 that even though you guys can get hold of these cards quite easily, a lot of you have struggled in wiring them up. So actually having these wires on the outside will actually help things later on. It's amazing how many wires there are for such a simple unit, and hopefully the left hand body will now click into place as well. Just going to lift the switch guards up and insert the left hand guard for the fuel cutout switches. With our sections together, we've got our M6 threaded rod, and I'm really hoping, yeah, it's just going to slide through and attach all the sections really firmly together. Okay, finally the flaps detent is done. I've got my chisel, because I'm finding the chisel is the best way to get the 3D prints off the glass plate. That's the flaps detent bracket created on the 3D printer. So I've designed this so that you should be able to get the screws in from underneath without any problem. Here we've got our flaps lever. I'm hoping we're just going to pull the body apart slightly, slide it over the pot. You can see that the pot is nice and tight on the flaps lever shaft. There's no slippage, so now we can fit the flaps handle. Okay guys, check this out. This is my 757-767 throttle assembly that somebody asked for online. I wasn't that keen on starting it, but I thought, why not try something different? And I am really pleased with how it turned out. You would not believe the weight of this thing. It's actually quite heavy. The throttle levers, look, are really quite firm. You need to hold the unit to move it because of the brakes on there. You can set that to your own friction. Same as the speed brake. We've got working press buttons underneath, working autopilot releases. Our fuel cutoffs, they light up perfectly. Stab trim cutouts, they work. And our flaps lever. Now this has to be one of the strongest and firmest felt flap levers I've created so far. It is so smooth, and it's got a real strong force to lift it up and move it to the next foot in detent. Really pleased with that. In fact, I am really pleased with how this has turned out. Now if you want these plans, they're available online. The next episode will be how to wire this loom up. Ideally, if you're going to make this, you'd put the interface card inside and just have a single USB cable coming out. But because in the next episode I want to show you how to wire up the Arduino Micro, Leo Bodner and the Arduino Leonardo, we'll leave these cables out at the side so we can get easy access to them. I'll leave you with a quick look around the throttle. Until next time guys, sim out.